Hello, my friends in Augusta. Good morning, everybody. All right, I've got a lot of slides to show y'all today, but my main goal, how many of y'all know what the blockchain is? Oh, thank God. All right, no, it's gonna be a big deal. It's gonna change pretty much everything in y'all's world, and I'm not kidding. And so my goal when y'all leave here in an hour or 52 minutes is that y'all have a grounding and at least understand what the blockchain is and the effect that it could have in y'all's business, both in terms of bookings and in facilities, but mostly in facilities is where I'm gonna try and concentrate. But what I'm gonna talk about is the potential for blockchain to disrupt y'all's business, all right? And especially the focus being on the word potential, because there's not a lot out about it right now. If you look it up, there's really not a lot of stuff on Google or anything about it. But people are starting to catch on. This is a paper that came out recently from China. It's in the journal Financial Innovation, and they were talking about overview of business innovations and research opportunities in blockchain. And in their concluding remarks, they said, for instance, a combination of digital locks and smart contracts, which you're going to hear a lot about. That's what blockchain is all about, is smart contracts. And blockchain-based transactions will enable renting rooms without human intervention. It'll also work throughout your supply chain, run your building, do the power, all those sorts of things. Blockchain is a shared ledger, which I'm going to explain to you, but it's going to be, if you Google it, you'll see what I'm talking about. What I believe is the transformational power of blockchain to enable trust. Blockchain is all about trust between two parties, much as the internet is about connection. The blockchain is about trust, and it's essentially going to be the internet of trust. And the essence of blockchain lies its ability to support trustworthy transactions via networked computation. How many of y'all have heard of Bitcoin? You've heard of Bitcoin, right? All right, the blockchain is the underlying, technology behind the Bitcoin. And what's interesting is, I'll talk about Bitcoin a little bit. I think Bitcoin's kind of going to go away in a sense, but blockchain is going to essentially change our world. So if I was going to give this speech a title, it would be Data Collected by Sensors, Study with Ambient Intelligence Combined with Bookings plus Payments, all living through the blockchain. Y'all want to leave now, or are you still going to stay with me? It's actually kind of cool. So what is the blockchain, and is it innovative or disinnovative for hotels? If you Google blockchain facilities, this is how little known the subject is. The fourth thing that comes up is me. So, you know, I'm going to research this talk. What am I going to do, plagiarize myself? I don't think so, but there's very little that's been done on that, but people are getting more and more interested in it. If you look at the searches, the Google searches of Bitcoin versus the blockchain, you'll see that the blockchain, especially in the last couple of years, has really caught on. In the Wall Street Journal, day before yesterday in the CIO section, they devoted 3 huge articles to the blockchain and how it's going to transform business, so you might want to take a look at those. But everything's all about data. You know, this all involves data and how data is changing our world. And companies are now becoming data companies. And this is where blockchain comes into all this. Businesses are transforming into data businesses. I mentioned University Hospital. These are my friends, by the way, that are referred to from Club Car in Augusta, Georgia. Right there, this is our hospital, University Hospital. And I often say that University Hospital, let me put it this way, adjusted for inflation, University Hospital cost $75 million to build. All right, it was built in 1973. So adjusted for inflation, it cost $75 million to build. The electronic healthcare records module in it, the data record in it, was $80 million. So the electronic healthcare records, taking care of the data in the hospital, costs more than the hospital cost, all right? It's turned into a data institution. Sarah, that was really hard to Photoshop if you're out there. You see that? Can you imagine? Anyway, businesses have long been turning into data businesses. In the 50s, John Hancock changed the insurance business on 600 megabytes worth of data. The airline reservation system was put on 807 megabytes of data. Federal Express in the 70s ran on a mainframe that had 80 gigabytes of data, which is less than the flash drive that I brought my speech in on. Citicorp set up the ATM network with 450 gigabytes of data in the 80s. Walmart at 2010 had 180 terabytes of data. Now it's petabytes, but Walmart is nothing but Walmart is not a store. I say it all the time. Walmart is a data institution, and hospitals are becoming data institutions also, and there are going to be certain things that enable all that data to work and help y'all do y'all's jobs, both in booking and in facilities. But is this going to be one of those things that's going to be a fad? I talk a bit about sometimes disinnovation, which is this term I coined when it's something you think is innovative, but it really isn't. So is the blockchain going to be innovative or disinnovative? Because I believe, and this article believes, that innovation is the most important and overused word in America. And some people say we've reached peak innovationism, where you just put innovation on anything and you're Mark Zuckerberg 2.0. People have a hard time defining innovation. These folks in Britain decided to try and do a paper defining what in the world innovation is. And the study aimed to identify the recurring attributes of innovation and figure out what exactly innovation is. And so they did a big word study, a meta study across all kinds of papers, and decided they couldn't figure it out and just drew a picture. So nobody really knows, you know what I mean? Nobody really knows what innovation is. My theory is that innovation is measurable, positive change in people's lives through new processes, services, or products. Dis, when you put dis in front of it, dis denotes a reversal of that state. So something that's disinnovative means you're going backwards because of new products, services, or processes. And is adoption of the blockchain in y'all's business going to be disinnovative? I'm going to try and answer that in this speech. Here's something disinnovative, by the way. Originally, Steve Jobs didn't want an app store. He just wanted those original, I guess, 12 apps on the iPhone 10 years ago. But now, in the first half of this year, the App Store itself netted more money than all of Apple did in all of 2007. So he was engaging in a little bit, the master of innovation was engaged in a little bit of disinnovation when he wanted to not have an app store. Tiger Woods had the most beautiful golf swing in the world, and he decided, I'm going to innovate with my golf swing, and kind of messed it up, sort of threw out his back, and was never really the same. NASCAR's decided to build a lot of big tracks out west and close down some of the southern tracks where their fans, rednecks, are, and people are stopping attending NASCAR races now because NASCAR's gone a little bit too highbrow for them. People are cutting the cord a lot. Because the cable companies are disinnovating, and that they don't realize that channels are apps now, and people want to buy a certain channel. My late mom, basically paid $150 to Comcast every month for one channel, for Fox News. That's a little bit disinnovative, and that's why people are cutting the cord right now. We've heard how ESPN is losing all kinds of customers because they're perceived as having a political bent. That is disinnovation. The NFL, I think I might just probably skip through these slides this week, but what's going on that's interesting with them is they had what they thought was an innovation. It's called the Red Zone, where you can watch the highlights of all the football games during a day in like 30 minutes. Well, all right, that sounds great, but if you're doing that, what are you not doing? You're not watching the games. And what pays for the NFL? Advertising. So in a way, that's very disinnovative. Plus, it was funny, the NFL tried to push Microsoft Surface on everybody, and Bill Belichick was like, I just can't take this anymore, I'm going back to paper. So that little promotional stunt of theirs was a little bit disinnovative. But my bigger question, it goes to what is the blockchain, and is it innovative or disinnovative for hotels? So what I have to do is explain the blockchain. And this is the meat of the speech. And as long as you understand this 10 minutes of the speech, I've done my work and I can go sit down and just kind of cycle through the rest of my slides. But anyway, here's what the blockchain is. Have y'all worked with Google Docs? I'm going to go back to this analogy, but if you've worked with Google Docs, you can understand the blockchain, all right? The blockchain was invented in a paper about 10 years ago by somebody nobody knows. It's a fake name. It's like Sayoki Ryamuchi. I can't remember his exact name. Nobody really knows who invented it. But he wrote a paper that was a very seminal paper on how you could invent a cryptocurrency. And I'm not going to claim that that's my closet. at one point in time, but it was my closet at one point in time because I was mining Bitcoins, I was mining cryptocurrency until I got a little bit bored with it. But I've been obsessed with it for a long time. Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency. In other words, the owner is non-identifiable, and Bitcoin basically in Argentina has been used as an alternate currency for the last few years because they've been having currency crises, and in Las Vegas, some fellas actually passed like $500,000 or $250,000 around a table from iPhone to iPhone, in just a few minutes. All right, it's very mobile. You can't do that with money. Try wiring money or ACHing money. It's a pain in the butt. So it's very private and it's very mobile. Bitcoin is, and it's becoming bigger and bigger. The New York Times said the power of friction-free transactions over the internet will unleash consolidation and globalization, and we're going to wind up with 6 digital currencies: the dollar, the euro, the yen, the pound, the ren, I can never pronounce the Chinese currency, and Bitcoin, and one other I would put in there, which is called Ether, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. The Fed has actually said, yeah, Bitcoin makes sense. We can see how that would work. So the government's starting to get in on it now because they realize it's a big deal, and they've realized this for several years. In 2013, Ben Bernanke said it had long-term promise. But what I'm here to tell y'all is the long-term promise is not so much in the Bitcoin itself, but in the blockchain that underpins it. US regulators, you can trade it as a commodity now. And it actually, Bitcoin right now, if you took it all and added up, is worth $40 billion. All the Bitcoin coins, all the Ether coins, which is like Bitcoin, you'll understand in a minute, are worth $30 billion. Western Union market's cap is $10 billion, and all the gold in the world is worth $7 trillion. So it's still small, but it's growing. And it's growing in transaction volumes. If you go back, you can see on the right, you go from Q3, average transactions daily. These are people paying somebody for something else, even a house, over the internet with Bitcoin, all right? So these are the number of transactions. They're really growing. What's interesting is Bitcoin's market cap is kind of going down. Ether's is going up, which I'll talk about. Ether is the other one. But just remember, it's a cryptocurrency. Ether, which is also called Ethereum, is important to you guys because Bitcoin the underlying technology is the blockchain. Ether, which is another cryptocurrency, its underpinning is also the blockchain. So it's the blockchain that's important, and these summaries will show you how Ethereum has just exploded this year. I can't remember the exact number, but at the beginning of this year, if you had invested $100 in Ether, you'd have about $2,500 right now. When I started talking about Bitcoin, which was about 7 years ago, if I'd put $100 in Bitcoin when I started talking about it, it'd be worth $93 million right now. So that's what attracts all the attention, is the massive gains people have been made by trading it, and they're not paying as much attention as they need to, I don't think, to what underlies it, which is the blockchain. It's blocks that make up Bitcoin, and I'm going to explain, these are year-to-date returns. Digital assets, so year-to-date, this is as of half the year, U.S. equities returned 10%, and digital currencies had, on average, returned 445%. So they're trading vehicles, but they're really more than that. And actually, you can tell something's got wide acceptance when Microsoft accepts it. And you can pay for Microsoft goods now online with Bitcoin. And I've done it, it works. That's how I pay my Office 365 subscription. Expedia will take it now. So it's working its way into y'all's business, but in different ways. So everybody's captivated by Bitcoins, but it's the blockchain that's the really important thing. As I said before, the essence of the blockchain lies in the fact that it's the internet of trust between two parties. And that's what I really want y'all to remember. This is what a Bitcoin transaction looks like in general. I'm going to look over here. You can think of the blockchain as a big spreadsheet, a Google spreadsheet or an Excel spreadsheet with cell numbers, like A1, B1, C1. And over here on the left, you see BTC stands for Bitcoin. Alice in her wallet, your wallet is a cell on that spreadsheet, has 10 Bitcoin, and 55 Bitcoin in another address at address 2, and she wants to pay Bob 60. Bob takes the 60 over at his address, which is address B1, and sends her back 5, all right, at a new address on the blockchain. And I'm going to show y'all why it has to be a new address on the blockchain. Once there's a block on the blockchain, it's secure and can never be changed, all right? And here's how it really works. This is the meat of what I'm going to tell you. All right, when on the blockchain in a Bitcoin transaction, someone requests a transaction. Let's say I want to buy a flat screen TV using Bitcoin. Someone requests a transaction. The transaction is broadcast to a bunch of computers called nodes. I have one of these nodes at home. Everybody who has one of these nodes has an up to the minute or about an up to the 15-minute ledger. We have the entire blockchain ledger on our computers. So that transaction is broadcast to the nodes who compete on trying to decrypt or hash it, all right, to make sure it's a valid transaction. And that's how you get paid in Bitcoin. If you're somebody like me, a Bitcoin miner, you get paid for decrypting transactions. And once it's authenticated by me and other people, it's sent off and the transaction is complete, and you see that little red cube in there. All right, that's the block that's been generated during this transaction. That block is added to the existing blockchain forever. All right, it's on the end for all time. It's immutable, it can never change. That is the essence of a transaction on the blockchain. Does that sort of make sense? You make a transaction, then it's added onto, you make a transaction on a giant spreadsheet, basically, and this new cell in the spreadsheet is added, it's hashed, it cannot be, it's encrypted, and it can never be changed. It's added to the end of the blockchain forever. The selling points to this are consensus. All the ledgers in the network, like the one I have at my house, are all kept in sync, like every 10 or 15 minutes, and we all agree to the what's and whens of a transaction. So this is why I say it's trusted, because a lot of people are in on that. There are records of where each asset has been from cell to cell. I'm calling them from cell to cell, but that can also mean from block to block. Anything written on the ledger cannot be undone. It's immutable, all right? It's there forever, and it's final. Anything that's on the blockchain cannot be disputed or rewritten. So this is what enables the trust in all of this, and this is why I say if you understand Google Docs, you can understand blockchain, because if any of y'all worked on a Google Docs spreadsheet with another person and you're both editing it at the same time, well, it's just you two that can go in and change cells, you know, the both of you, that can change the cells in, you know, Google Sheets. You two agree on the changes that you have made in that cell. No one else from the outside can come in and change it. That's pretty much how the blockchain works, all right? It's like a giant Google Docs spreadsheet, and if you can remember that when somebody brings it up, it's I find the easiest way to remember and explain it. If you want to, you can go watch transactions on the blockchain minute by minute on blockchain.info, and it's actually kind of interesting, especially during the ransomware crisis with hospitals. You could actually go through and find the blocks where people were being paid ransom for ransomware. But you couldn't really identify who was getting paid because it's encrypted, but you could see the money going. If a hospital got ransomed for $10,000, you could see the $10,000 worth of Bitcoin going from one place to the other, but you couldn't identify where the other was. That's why there was no ransomware until there was Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the only way you can enable that kind of thing. In healthcare, where I talk a lot, blockchain is taking over because people are wanting to store electronic medical records or electronic healthcare records, EHR. They're wanting to store those on the blockchain so that lots of people have access, trusted parties have access to all this data at one time, which is a big deal. This year in Orlando at HIMSS, they really concentrated on the blockchain. It was its coming out party in healthcare. They talked about alternative payment methods, connected health experience, cybersecurity command, but then they were talking about interoperability, innovation, and intelligent health, but everything surrounded the blockchain. And they had an event called Blockchain and Healthcare Rock Stars of Technology event. People are really in healthcare, they're really centering on this. Like I said, the analogies between hospitals and parts of healthcare, and what y'all do are very telling, so I think it's heading y'all's way next. And like I said, the government's in on it. You can see HHS is actually looking at, the problem with EHRs, electronic healthcare records, is they're not transferable easily. Let's say you're here and then you get sick in New Jersey. It's hard if someone else is on a different software system for them to use that. All right, well, the blockchain makes it easy because both trusted parties can go straight to the cell, to the block, where the electronic healthcare records are being held. So healthcare is all over it. Now recently, there's been a bunch of action around blockchains, people opening up private blockchains and having, have y'all heard of ICOs, initial coin offerings? They're like IPOs, but people are offering their own cryptocurrencies. When you hear ICOs, that's what people are talking about. All this is accelerating faster than anything in business right now, people paying attention to blockchain-related events, which is why I'm so happy that y'all hadn't heard about it. So when you do hear about it, or even go back and read the journal the past couple of days, you'll be like, oh my, this is growing a little bit faster than I can believe. And what's interesting, and what's caught Visa and MasterCard's attention, is that the transaction fees are so low. Basically, the transaction fees are paid out to the miners simply for the electricity they use in dehashing or decrypting the transaction. It's a function of electricity, the transaction amount. So it's not $3 or 3% or whatever Visa or MasterCard is. It's a very low amount, which has gotten everybody's attention. There you can see search volume on all blockchain-related items has just skyrocketed over the last few years. And what's happened is you have your public blockchains, which I've spoken to y'all about, like Ethereum and Bitcoin, but people are also having private, over there on the right, privacy-focused cryptocurrencies. You can have your own currency, or your private blockchain. Let's say Hyatt Hotels could have its own private blockchain to run all its data on, and that's where I'm heading towards. Once again, you see a lot of action in Bitcoin, but that's going to change because people more and more realize blockchain is where it's at in banking, healthcare, insurance, advertising, legal, because you're going to hear a lot in the future about smart contracts, legal, and in the supply chain, which concerns a lot of y'all. There's something called the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. When you hear about Ethereum, what that is that's a blockchain that's semi-public. It's public, but it was sort of put together by larger institutions like JP Morgan. So there's big institutions behind it, and it seems to be the blockchain to which the larger companies and institutions are gravitating towards. The Enterprise Ethereum Alliance becomes the world's largest open source. By the way, that's the other thing about it. All of this stuff is open source. Blockchain initiative, and there was a huge conference in China recently, and were they talking about, and in China, they've recently shut down Bitcoin trading. People had a mania there for it for a while, but what everybody over there realizes is that the real story is the blockchain. And if you look at, there was a survey done, and if you look at what sector of blockchain applications are you most bullish on, privacy-focused transactions was 20%, and asset management tools, in other words, inventories, facilities-related stuff was 18%, all right? So what you have in the blockchain technology market, you have public blockchains like Bitcoin, and you have enterprise blockchains that, let's say, Hyatt could do on their own. Public blockchains include Bitcoin and Ethereum, and it's sort of, the analogy would be Google and Amazon. And the enterprise blockchains are Ripple Chain and something called the Hyperledger, which are analogous to private data networks set up by Oracle. So that's sort of how you can think about these things. The public versus enterprise. Enterprise writes faster, all the participants are approved, their identities are known, and you can trade any asset, whereas the public blockchains, everybody's anonymous. So that's the difference right there. All right, I'm going to take a real quick jump. This is why it's going to be important in the facilities business. I want to take a real quick jump into explaining something called ambient intelligence. How many of y'all have heard of ambient intelligence? Ambient intelligence, quickly, is artificial intelligence applied to the Internet of Things to give it context and make sense of the data. In healthcare, you have sensors everywhere, and what ambient intelligence does is it gathers all the data, for instance, the bracelets that patients are wearing, and puts it all together and makes sense of it. Disney, how many of y'all have worn magic bands? Disney magic bands are ambient intelligence. You're walking through the park, it knows where you are in the park, it's gathering intelligence about that, and it's learning about you, okay? That's ambient intelligence, taking intelligence from disparate sensory places or something that you're wearing on you and making sense of it. And they do it, in fact, in a restaurant. You can just go there to a restaurant. It's funny at Disney, and you punch in outside what you want to eat. You sit anywhere, and they know where you are. They find you, and they've already charged your bracelet. I mean, it's crazy the things you can do. But also Disney has gone big with the blockchain with something called Dragon Chain. They have their own private blockchain, which I'm going to get to later. And Disney is a huge hospitality company. And I think this is the big clue that I needed to tell me that this is like a real thing. I was telling Mike about it today. But ambient intelligence is where you're taking, it works like HAL in 2001: A Space Odyssey. HAL monitored everything and took care of the folks on the spacecraft. You take information and give it context. All this flood of data, which we're faced with these days, you take it and you give it context. It's a mixture of artificial intelligence and all this nonsensical data that's being generated by all these sensors that are in our lives now. The first place you're really going to see this a lot is in healthcare, because you'll be wearing your Apple Watch. You might have a pacemaker on that you can actually. Did y'all hear you can hack a pacemaker through Bluetooth? Isn't that crazy? But everything's sensory data now being sent out from devices, first off in healthcare, but I think it's going to make its way towards y'all. So the reason I bring up ambient intelligence, and I'm showing you all these sensors that are used in smart environments, is because hotels are also becoming smart environments, all right? With the lights, I don't know if y'all noticed in the rooms here, when at night, when you walked across the room, a little light would flash on. It was a motion detector, and to give you a little light. What I also noticed was this morning at 6 a.m. when you walked across the room, that light did not come on. So it's smart enough to know not to come on after dawn, I suppose. Ambient intelligence takes the ubiquity of all these devices in our lives, in these hotels, in hospitals, and uses AI to give it context. And what it does is it looks at activity, and then it discovers patterns, looks for anomalies, and makes a decision on what to do with that information. And I'm going to explain what that means. Ambient intelligence is context aware, it's personalized, it's adaptive, it's transparent, and it's going to be everywhere. It's going to be everywhere in this hotel. It'll be everywhere across all the Hyatt hotels. And I want to show you all the potential, which is what I started off with, the potential of what it's able to do. And it's all about inference. It's inferring patterns from all the data that it receives, okay? So that's ambient intelligence, is the art of inference. This is being used quite a bit in elder care, all right? You'll put sensors in somebody's home, which really don't privacy invade, but they recognize the person as a person, the sensors up on the wall, and it follows their behavior as they go from room to room and learns their patterns during the day, all right? And there are a lot of very cutting-edge elder care institutions using this, and it learns their activities. So let's say these are actually two different houses in an elder care place, and these are where all the sensors are, the red lights are, and they detect activity. You can see on the left, red is motion, and you can see where the doors are and temperature monitors and all that sort of thing. But it basically watches what happens with the person inside and says, all right, we can sort of decode these types of behaviors from what room they're in and what we think they're doing. Because in general, people act the same way. And this graph on the left, the colors are different activities that have been monitored and graphed by sensors. So purple is when they're sleeping. This starts at midnight on the far left. And as you see during the day, different people do different activities. They go to the toilet, they enter their home, they leave home, they relax, they sleep. You can learn things about them, which is awesome in case there's an anomaly. This is what I talked about, anomaly detection. If someone goes into the bathroom and they're in there for 2 hours when they're normally in there for 30 minutes, then something's wrong and somebody needs to be sent to this person's room because something anomalous is going on. You know, they have fallen, and falls account for 60% of, you know, starting to get in real trouble when you're old starts with a fall. Also, I've been working on a little experiment for a long time with the Echo, where if you look on that, I've been programming the Echo, you program it in Python, for words that listen when somebody's fallen down. So you can just, a person in elder care in a senior home could say, please help me, I've fallen down and I can't get up. And the Echo will send for help. Well, the problem with this is, what if somebody says those words on TV? Did y'all see South Park last week? On South Park last week, Cartman got on there and went, Alexa, put butt plugs on my shopping list. And so in millions of homes across the United States, butt plugs were put on their shopping list. And he did it to Siri, and he did it to OK Google. So that's the problem with this type of thing, which is kind of, watch the show, it's fantastic, but you know the next step with this type of thing is these things are going to be installed and collecting data in hotels. Wynn started doing it in Las Vegas, Wynn started doing it last December, I think, but more and more hotels are getting into putting these things in there and collecting more data about their customer and improving the customer experience. And the more data you can get, the more scale you get, the more valuable that information is, and the more you can use IT to make something out of it. Now, so do you feel as though kind of you understand what blockchain is? Big spreadsheet, secure, and you can store just about anything on there. In terms of bookings, one area where it's going to affect y'all's business is in blockchain-enabled B2B travel marketplace, where you're essentially cutting out the middleman. For a boutique hotel, it's hard to distribute their inventory, and when they do, they sometimes have to pay large commission fees through rate party agreements. Well, there was just an article in Business Travel News that said blockchain could reshape travel management, because what blockchain is really good at is disintermediation. It's taking the middleman out of things, sort of like the internet did anyway. It's great at disintermediation. There's a company called Winding Tree, which is having its own travel blockchain. And what Winding Tree is doing, this is the travel ecosystem as you see it now. On the left, you have your traveler, and you can see he searches. First, he searches for a destination, then he goes through a travel agency or an online travel agency, and then aggregators, blah, blah, blah. Well, in a blockchain-based system, the traveler, who's a known traveler because he has his own travel identity on the blockchain, can essentially go straight to the hotel, straight to the airline, straight to whomever, with all his preferences already included in his blockchain. TUI, is it TUI or TUI? It's TUI? All right, TUI is interesting. The CEO there came out and said blockchain will disrupt Expedia and Airbnb. And in fact, he sold his online booking service, Hotel Beds, because he thought, for $1.3 billion, because he thought the blockchain is going to be that big and replace it. And what it's going to be replaced with is something called intelligent AI travel agents, artificial intelligence travel agents, which what you're going to find is, you're going to find that in finance. Right now there's something called an intelligent financial agent, which knows when your bills are due, will look at your checking account or your different accounts, and if a bill is due and there's not enough money in this account, it knows to go in this account and pay that bill, and maybe set some aside automatically if you have enough for investments. It's an intelligent financial instruments. We also have these things for healthcare. They're called intelligent healthcare assistants, which the Apple Watch is rapidly becoming. Well, there's going to be intelligent AI travel agents, and the guy from TUI basically is one of the biggest proponents of it, and this is what he said. He said blockchain may spell the end of travel intermediaries because at its core, blockchain is about decentralizing information. In theory, blockchain poses a huge threat to many businesses that act as a transactional intermediary because they're, bless you, because they're no longer needed. So the end of travel intermediaries, it says that Sabre, Expedia, and Airbnb don't really own hotel rooms or airplanes and mostly just sell their tech. How useful will they be if a better form of distribution comes along? TUI is happy to get on board with blockchain because travel is becoming commoditized, but what TUI is trying to do with their hotels and destinations is offer more of a content, I can't remember who talked about it yesterday, but somebody talked about a content-based experience. Y'all are creating content for the people that stay with y'all. Blockchain is cheap to implement. You don't have to go out and spend hundreds of millions of dollars to implement this stuff. It can be a new revenue stream. For instance, if I like room 62 in this hotel, I can actually make sure that I can get room 62. There'll be a blockchain entry for that room, for room 62, and I can go directly to it. And TUI is also thinking about developing this and taking it public. So they may just monetize their own blockchain, kind of like Disney's gonna do, and I'm gonna show y'all that. Facilities, which is probably what y'all are more interested in, I wanted to give y'all an example of this. There's an IBM case study that's out. IBM is all over this blockchain. In fact, some people were saying lately it's called International Blockchain Management is what IBM's initials are gonna start standing for because they are all in on blockchain. And did a case study where they're combining data that's stored on the blockchain and using Watson, which is AI, to make sense of the data. And this is where all that stuff I told you about ambient intelligence comes back in. This is the real life example of that actually happening. So ISS, which is a facilities management company, turned to IBM Watson to transform management of 25,000 buildings worldwide. So they're gonna have AI running these buildings through data that's stored on the blockchain. Happy buildings are good for business, and let me show you all what they did. Working with IBM, ISS will integrate and analyze data from millions of devices and sensors embedded into buildings, including doors, windows, chairs, meeting rooms, dispensers, and air conditioning systems. It'll be uploaded to Watson, and Watson will analyze it and optimize things. All right, and this goes straight down to the customer level too. Here you can see one of the screens. It's showing presence in the rooms, if somebody's in a room or not. And they actually installed it at ISS headquarters. And it's kind of interesting because you can tell who's in what room, what the air needs to be in that room. If nobody's in the room, then the air obviously needs to be a certain temperature. In this building, there's a total of 527 devices. What's really kind of cool, I don't know if you can see it on this one. This is when you're doing it over a network. But at one level, here it is. At one level, they show the number of people in the building and the number of plates they need to have for the people in that building. So it's calculating how many plates need to be ready to take care of the people who are occupying the rooms, the meeting rooms that they're in, and they're being viewed by the little sensors underneath the table. So plates available and plates needed is one of the things that Watson is optimizing, all right? That's ambient intelligence. That's using AI to take what would be nonsensical data and make sense out of it, and it's all stored on the blockchain. Plus, you can ask Watson to bring you charts and pens, and it'll send a message to the hotel telling you to send charts and pens to those different rooms. So it looks at the whole building, it integrates that, and you can totally see how that would translate to a hotel. There you see IBM blockchain bringing together the world's most advanced expertise, technology, and ecosystem to transform industries. What is the IBM blockchain? It's a private blockchain, which I told you about before, where they know all the parties are involved and all the transactions are permissioned, all right? It's a disruptor and an innovator. I hate that word innovator, but you combine the Internet of Things and the blockchain, and you wind up with something really interesting. IBM's introducing a new blockchain service for IoT, which will work across lots and lots of industries. This is in a supply chain and a shipping industry. This is how it would work. You'd have, when you're transferring something from overseas, you have the airport's records, the bank's records, the port's records, the ocean carrier's records, the authority's records. It's inefficient, vulnerable, expensive, and there's a lack of transparency as the way things are right now. But if everybody is on a permissioned blockchain, everybody has access to the needed information all at one time. All right, that's the beauty of the blockchain, is it disintermediates all the mess and makes things way more simple, makes trade way more simple, and you can sort of see the potential for making things in a hotel super simple. They've done a blockchain that tracks food from its source to a restaurant at the very end with sensors along the way checking the food and everybody keeping a record on the blockchain. All right, so what you hadn't heard about before this morning, the blockchain is really becoming a big deal pretty quickly. Right now, IBM outranks Microsoft as a blockchain research leader, but Microsoft is trying to catch up quick, much as how, remember when Bill Gates had his uh-oh moment and said, we need to go all in for the internet? That happened about 15, maybe 20 years ago. Microsoft is having an uh-oh moment with the blockchain right now, and they're realizing they need to be doing some catching up. But it validates the concept of the blockchain. If you look at the people who are taking it seriously, the Federal Reserve, IBM, Microsoft, you realize that that validates the concept, and this is actually a real deal. There was a paper written recently, before last night at 7 o'clock, there was a paper, this was the only paper I could find. It was an intelligent hotel room, and it says this paper represents an innovation application of ambient technology, we've talked about that, in the domain of tourism and leisure that aims to improve quality. The main objective is to formulate an ambient ecosystem that observes the surroundings using non-invasive technology. Remember what I showed you about the elder care homes, and adapt behavior in real time to deliver intelligent and personalized services to the occupants of a guest room. All right, that's what we're talking about, taking all this data that otherwise wouldn't make sense, having it available in real time on the blockchain, and using AI to make sense of it within the context of blockchain and hotels, both in booking and facilities. And I started off talking about the potential for a blockchain to disrupt, and whether it's innovative or disinnovative for hotels. And what's interesting is at 9:30 last night, I found a little more validation about this. I went to researching the Dragon Chain, Disney's blockchain a little bit more, because I figure who's one of the biggest hospitality companies in the world? Disney. I knew they were doing their own blockchain called Dragon Chain, and I was like, let's see if these guys think it's going to be innovative. Now, in a blockchain, like I said, because it works like a spreadsheet, these are example fields that are in Disney's blockchain. The transaction that takes place, it can be a food transaction, a hotel room transaction, entering a room, a payment transactions. You have types and classes, timestamps, origins, the taxonomy, where did it come from. So remember, there are field names that can be assigned to about any part of a business. The food part of the hotel, the HVAC part of the hotel, the customer's record part of the hotel, those can all be integrated together. And I was wondering what they would use, Disney would use this for, and happily, Disney answered me. I found a paper, a white paper Disney wrote about this, which has not been accessed very much that I can tell, but it's Disney's Dragon Chain, the blockchain use cases. And let's look at the list of what Disney is planning on using, a hospitality company, the blockchain for. Identity systems, including privacy, security, and confidentiality. Ticketing, that makes sense. Their ticketing is going to live on the blockchain. Rights, expressions, and licensing. What is Disney at its heart? Disney is an IP company. Disney is right here talking about putting their IP on the blockchain. They must be pretty serious if they're going to put their IP on the blockchain. Decentralized processing and computing, voting systems. In other words, you can vote on different rides. We're not talking about voting, although that has been discussed, political voting on the blockchain. Legal, using smart contracts with vendors, having them exist on the blockchain. Audits, generic crypto type stuff, and I was like, wow, that's a lot of stuff Disney's using it for. Oh, look, there's a whole nother page. All right, Disney is super serious about the blockchain, and in fact, Disney is having, well, they spun it off. Dragon Chain, I think either this month or next month, is having an initial coin offering of their own private blockchain because Disney is spinning it off. But you can see how important this is to that organization. All right, they realized that blockchain, which y'all really hadn't heard a lot before y'all came into the room this morning, is like one of those things where it's like, uh-oh, it pops up and it changes your life really quickly. So at the beginning I was talking about how disinnovation is going backwards because of new processes, services, or products, and whether or not the blockchain as regards hotels was going to be disinnovative. And my definition of innovation is a measurable positive change in people's lives through new products, services, or processes. And that is one ugly slide. That's the slide we started out with before. But remember how I said I could have called this speech, I did this at 11 last night, which is why it's formatted so bad. But anyway, the speech could be data collected by sensors, studied with ambient intelligence, combined with booking and payments, all living through the blockchain and improving the customer experience. For y'all, is that going to be innovative or disinnovative? And I think the only answer that you can really come up with is it's definitely going to be an innovation. There's no doubt about it. And I think it's going to come on quicker than you think. It's quiet right now, but it's going to affect your industry in a lot of ways. Unfortunately, you know who's doing a lot of Bitcoin mining right now? The North Koreans. Yeah, they're mining Bitcoin to generate Bitcoin Cash right now. It was great. Back when Bitcoin was $40 or $50, it was fun to do, you know, and I just did it as sort of a mental experiment. But you have people with giant rooms full of mainframes now that are dehashing these transactions and using way more computing power than I could throw at it. I don't know if y'all remember my picture, but the picture I showed, I essentially had 4 PlayStation 3s hooked together because I was using the graphic processing units on those because GPUs are so efficient at crunching math. You know, that type of big data math, which is why you're seeing, I don't know if y'all have noticed this, so many computers offering external GPUs now. It's because they crunch big data much better than other types of computers, or like graphics cards, because they have to crunch all those fancy graphics on screen, can do math much faster than the chip that's inside your computer. Anybody else?
So public blockchains can be like millions and billions of people, whereas the private blockchains are only those that are...
Right, yeah. Public blockchains are sort of like an open source database, like MongoDB, which is open source, as opposed to Oracle's database, which is a private thing. It's a rough analogy, but that's the best analogy I can come up with. Okay, Mike? Thank y'all again very much.